If you're watching this video, you probably have two questions. What's the best way to fix open miters? And also, what's the best wood filler for this project? As you can see here, we have an open miter on an outside corner. There's also a slate open miter on the inside corner. By the way, I did not install these baseboards, somebody else did. Sometimes these open miters happen, and that's okay. You can fix them if you want to take the baseboard off and redo the miter. If you choose to do that, I have a tip for you. Some homeowners put sealant or caulking in between the baseboard and the wall. If that's the case, you want to take a utility knife and you want to score that caulking before you pull the baseboard trim off the wall. That way you're not going to tear the paper and ruin the wall. But if you don't want to take the baseboard off the wall, we're going to show you two easy quick fixes of how to fix the open miter, and the first one is using DryDex spackling. I do want to say this is not a sponsored video by DAP. This is just a really great product. You can use this for nail holes in baseboard and trim work. As you can see, it's pink, and when it dries, it actually turns white. You'll see that a little bit later on. To speed up this installation, we're going to be using a 3-inch putty knife. You don't necessarily have to use this, but our baseboard trim is about that size, so it's really going to make this process much faster. Also, the great thing about a 3-inch knife is it does fit into the container, and you can just immediately start applying this. Oh, you know what? I almost forgot. One additional tip. You definitely want to apply painter's tape over top of your floors if you have hardwood floors. Whew. Good thing I remembered that. So what we can do here is we're just going to feather this into the gap. You really just want to try and fill this in the best that you can. It doesn't have to be perfect at first. You're going to be smoothing this out and working it into the joint. That's really the most important thing. You can use your finger to tool the DryDex into the joint. You can also use your putty knife at a 45-degree angle to the baseboard to clean off the excess. Just make sure you work the DryDex into the outside miter and get it to look as good as possible. It might be a little bit hard to see on camera, but this is already drying after just a few minutes. This is great because if you're doing this in the afternoon or over the weekend, this project isn't going to take you very long, and you're going to get good results. While this is drying, we'll apply the same spackling to the inside corner. I simply applied the DryDex with my index finger to the inside miter. And to clean this up, I am going to use my putty knife. This will take off that excess DryDex that's in the corner. So another hot tip for you is this. Make sure you can find the paint that matches the trim work in your house. You don't want to do any of this without doing that unless you want to go ahead and repaint this section of the baseboard. The next step was to use a damp sponge to sand down the DryDex. You can use a clean cloth or a rag to dry down the baseboard. As you can see, the miter looks pretty darn good. Then you can prime it and paint it to make it look awesome. DryDex is a great product because it's very forgiving, easy to use, easy to sand. It has the dry time indicator, so once it turns from pink to white, you can sand it with a sponge. That'll help cut down on the dust and make cleanup much easier. Now, what if you have high traffic in your house, a high traffic area with kids and pets who are constantly bumping into the baseboards, and you have these open miters that you need to fix? What product would be good for that situation? Well, that product is Bondo. This is what you want to use if you want to fix your open miters and you want them to be pretty much indestructible. A few things you should know about Bondo. It stinks. It's highly flammable. So those are some of the downsides to using it. Make sure you ventilate your house. Also, wear some type of respirator. This is a silica dust respirator. So you should want to use something like this to protect your lungs if you're going to be sanding the Bondo. Also, because the miter is over top of carpet and continues onto hardwood, we're going to protect this area using, ta-da, a cereal box top or side. By the way, who doesn't love Cheerios? And what is the bee's name? Does anybody know that? Let me know in the comments. Cereal boxes are great because they can slide underneath the baseboard and meet up with the drywall that's underneath it. So put a cereal box underneath this, and then you can do the exact same thing on the other side. So now you're going to protect this entire space, and if you want to really be anal retentive, you can use painter's tape underneath just to make sure that you don't have any kind of problems over top of the carpet. Then we'll slide this underneath. The other thing that you want are some protective gloves for your hands. You don't want to get the Bondo on your hands, so wear some type of glove that will protect your skin. Also, I highly recommend getting some of these spreaders. You can get these at your home store for like $5. These are great for using Bondo. You'll also need some sanding sponges. Hot tip for you, you need an 80 grit and a 180 grit. When you take them out of the packages, sometimes it's hard to tell between the two of them if you're not using these all the time. So just make sure you write the grit on the sides of the sponge. That way you won't forget which is which. Step one is to use your 80 grit sandpaper to clean up the edges where the open miter is located. So we're just going to lightly sand. Another benefit of having these cereal boxes in here is to collect all the dust. As you can see, I'm just taking off the primer where the open miter is located. Then you want to use a damp sponge to clean that area. You don't want any dust on the surface. And to speed this up, I'm going to take a clean rag and dry off the surface. There are two parts to the Bondo. There's actually a cream hardener inside here. So this is the cream hardener. And what you want to do is try to press on this to mix up the hardener on the inside of the tube. That's really important. So you want to try to knead this for about 30 seconds or so. Also, you need a non-porous surface to mix the Bondo on top of. The next step is to open up the Bondo. And the goal here is to pull out a 3-inch diameter circle that's roughly a 1/2 inch thick. Using a paint stir helps out quite a bit with this, so I recommend getting a paint stirrer. And the next step is to open up the cream hardener and put a little bead on top of the putty. Just a little bead like that is all you need. Then mix up the two components of the Bondo. Another really great tip is to try and smooth this out, because the flatter you make it, the more working time you have. And you need to mix this for approximately 2 minutes. So after 2 minutes, what you can do is then use one of your spreaders to spread this into the open miter. Now, obviously this is a ton. We don't need as much. So you're just going to have a little bit on the spreader, and we're going to go ahead and fill this. So once again, it's really hard to mess up this process because in this case, it's such a small open miter. And these spreaders are great for this particular project. So again, you just want to try it and smooth off any of the Bondo that is on the edge of the baseboard. And again, you can tool the joint with your finger and make it look a lot better. It's literally only been like 2 minutes, and this is already pretty hard. So one way to cut down on the Bondo dust is just, again, use a sponge on this as well. And if for whatever reason the sponge doesn't work for you, then you can use the 180 grit to get a smoother finish. Then we'll go ahead and prime and paint this and make it look like it was brand new. DryDex is easier to use than Bondo, but Bondo is great for high traffic areas and rock solid. But I'm curious, let me know down in the comments which one you would use, DryDex or Bondo. And if you like this video and you got some great tips, give it a thumbs up. That way somebody else will be able to find it. All right, we'll see you in the next tutorial. Take care.